But first, we have to pay tribute to one of the legends of the sport, man, because, as Knicks fans, we always, salute Patrick Ewing, but there would be no Patrick Ewing or the legend of Patrick Ewing without the legendary coach of Georgetown basketball, and that was John Thompson. And John Thompson's impact was not just on Patrick or the Georgetown basketball program, but his impact on the culture at large was certainly felt. So joining us tonight to pay tribute to Coach Thompson is an icon himself, friend of the program, JL, Chuck D in the building. Chuck, how you doing tonight?
What's up, gents? I'm an icon. I try. I don't know about icon. A lot of cons running around these days, man. So, I mean, but
I had the wordplay.
Hey, Coach Thompson, man. At 78, you have to salute that life. Even in the times that we have, some people consider that like being shortened. My dad passed at 77. I felt like he had a full life, but at the same time, you feel that, damn, make it to 85 or 90 or 80 or whatever. So a lot of times you hear people say, wow, he's still kind of passed kind of young. But in retrospect, with what happened this weekend when, Cliff Robinson, 53. Yeah. Come on, man. Yeah. It's like, and there's so many people checking out at 40s and their 50s, man, on the last, 5 months, man. And it's just not a
Chadwick Boseman as well.
Yeah, I mean, 43, man. 43. And kind of struck me because it came out of what we call nowhere. Mm-hmm. So in retrospect, when you talk about John Thompson, you're like, okay. And then we talk about the magnitude of a guy like John Thompson, because in the 70s and the 80s, sports had that magnitude of at least the microphone and the camera was there for the athletes if it wasn't there as much for entertainers. Muhammad Ali set that off because when they was talking about his boxing feats, he would grab the mic and first give praise due to Allah and then talk about what he wanted to talk about, even though the question might have been something else. Mm-hmm. And so that still was a rarity all the way up to the 80s and 90s. You had Reggie Jackson in New York, and he was a guy who would be called outspoken. But you got the reverence that John Thompson was somebody's father, and he was a father figure. And later on, when we had the pleasure of hearing John Thompson on color commentary on NBA games, as well as the NCAAs, I think he was also doing some of those games. You was hearing the assuredness of a black man who wasn't compromising all the time, bowing down, changing the tone in his voice, just to fit in. He's a proud black man. You're not going to be unproud playing next to Bill Russell anyway. You're going to come out of that Bill Russell aura and say, not only was he a backup, he wasn't a backup to Bill Russell, he was a player in Bill Russell's sphere. Mm-hmm. So I first got the vibe on John Thompson following Georgetown, because at that period, the Big East, and y'all might want to agree or disagree, but the Big East to me, or I should say the NCAAs, from 1975 to 1985 was just as big as the NBA, if not bigger. Mm. And when you talk about the NCAAs from 75 to 85, you got to talk about the Big East from 80 to 85, and you could go on further. But that 10-year period, and John Thompson was in the middle of that mix, along with Carnesecca and Massimino and Boeheim and people like that. But there was a solid structure of this dude who somehow permeated that father figure, that uncompromising voice, to be able to have us say, oh, I mean, things are tight there. And had us all believing in the street or in our hood, so to speak, that Georgetown was a damn near HBCU, which it wasn't, man. It was like the furthest. I spoke at Georgetown twice, man. And the first time I spoke, I was like, damn, it's like 3% black people here. It was almost like Harvard. And but the atmosphere that John Thompson said, I'm going to be at this school, but I'm going to bring in who you least expect. And not only that, every single one of my ball players are going to use this university and they're going to graduate. That was the mind-blowing thing. So when I follow the beginning of Georgetown, you have to talk about, I think, Michael Jackson, Sleepy Floyd, and then they recruited this young man from up in Boston named Patrick Ewing, which just changed the whole atmosphere on everything. And the fact that John Thompson and Patrick Ewing formed their bond. And understand this, is Patrick Ewing caught heat ever since he was in Boston with the whole atmosphere up in that area, racism like running rampant. And John Thompson was that father figure that came along, his sports father figure that said, I will protect you and I will not let this overrun you or any of one of these gentlemen, because these gentlemen I brought into the school, not only they will prove the opposite, they're going to get their degrees and we're going to just be, we standing tall. And even like when you talk about John Thompson, later on, he brings what? Michael Graham. Before Patrick Ewing and Charles Oakley, the first bodyguard for Patrick Ewing was Michael Graham with the bald head, in a time where cats was wearing not only afros, but they were wearing matted down, jerry curled afros. And this brother comes with the bald head, man. And before Mike Jordan, man, Patrick Ewing was the fashion statement dude with the T-shirt behind the jersey, right? Which everybody caught fire on. And then the Georgetown jackets, which signified the first hood starter jackets. And matter of fact, if you had one of those, I mean, it legitimized you even if you were illegit. So that cultural thing was that bond, as well as the NCAA being a focal point that everybody looked at as being some really top-notch, legitimate basketball. We looked at the Big East because in the late 70s and the early 80s, it was like our times recently with the Knicks. It was rough, man. But we could look at St. John's, we could look at the Big East, and it was bigger for us in the area than the NCAAs, man. I think one year we had 3 of the Final 4 in the NCAAs, and it was real ball, man. So I was asked this question earlier by my man Dana Scott, who actually writes for the Arizona Republic, and he asked me about, like, all right, his relationship with Allen Iverson, his relationship with Mutombo and Mourning and Patrick and all the other players with Wingate and all those guys. But I remember very clearly, just to give you a little bit of OG memory, his consoling the Adlai Stevenson graduate from the Bronx, Freddie Brown at 6'5". I thought Freddie Brown, man, was going to go NBA for real. I want to talk about a point guard, 6'5". He was a chipper. He passes the ball to Worthy after Michael Jordan hits that shot where he became Michael Jordan after Mike Jordan. And then Georgetown had the chance to get them back, and Freddie Brown got mixed up. The uniforms were kind of crazy too, and he passes to Worthy that goes and finishes off the game. But I remember John Thompson consoling Freddie Brown almost to a point that says, yo, son, this is just a game, man. This ain't life. And I think if somebody asked Fred Brown, who many people probably forgot about, I think John Thompson being there for Freddie Brown was somebody who was able to look at that in a perspective of life as that was just a game, man. Those guys went to Georgetown, they got their degrees, or they used Georgetown to their advantages as black men in this world, in this country.
Yeah, you mentioned his role as a father figure, and even though Georgetown had that style of physical and defense and that tenacity, on the other end, as you said, being a father figure, guys like AI can attest to it. Alonzo Mourning, Patrick Ewing, they said that, Patrick Ewing's mother made sure that he went to a school like at Georgetown because John Thompson could be that mentor, that father figure to him. They had a chief academic advisor sitting on the bench, making sure that these guys were doing their thing in school as well. I think the timing of his passing, when you look at the issues now that the NBA is facing with the players protesting and things of that nature and some of the backlash. And then when you look at a role that John Thompson had as kind of a trailblazer in terms of, getting more exposure for black coaches, he himself, organizing a protest 1989 Georgetown versus
Yeah.
Boston College in terms of protesting Prop 48.
Yes.
Which the NCAA had instituted to kind of raise the testing standards in terms of, which players could enroll in which schools. And John Thompson saying, this was disproportionately affecting our kids from the inner cities who may not have the quality education as the other kids in terms of, getting into our schools. So John Thompson was certainly a trailblazer in that regard.
Yeah, he always made sure that it wasn't about the X's and O's on the courts. He was always in the back rooms looking at, he walk in the back rooms and cats start to put their pens and pads to on the left to the right of them or do differently, man. So you need that. And then you always need, the OG consigliere in the room, that the advisor that comes in and tells you, what the boundaries are, when to pump the brakes, when to pump the gas. And John Thompson was clear about that. And like I said, we know him as a Georgetown coach, but before John Thompson was a Georgetown coach, he was a player at Providence of high note. Lenny Wilkins and went to Providence as well. And then he went to the Celtics, and, you in the realm of Bill Russell. So, and being friends with Bill Russell, you wasn't being a part of the Celtics, the all-black squad that people don't give props to. So John Thompson knew, in talking to Patrick Ewing, what the dynamics that young man came from, and he was there to protect him, but also tell him in a point of direction that this is going to work for you as a man.
And you also mentioned the Georgetown starter jackets. The way that they cover the game today, it's not just the players that are playing on the court. It's the fashion, the sneakers,
right.
What Westbrook is wearing and so on, and obviously the music. But now, the jacket is actually in the African American Museum in DC.
As it should be.
And then you have the Nike Terminators, so you can go all the way back to the mid '80s to really see the start of that confluence between basketball, hip hop, and just the overall culture.
Yeah, it's you call it BM before Mike, and Mike doesn't, everybody's seen The Last Dance and stuff like that, and I've commented on many, because when culture crosses over into sports in the 80s during R&B, and that was Reagan and Bush, the sports had to speak loud to us as giving us some kind of vision to look at. So that's why I'm called in to talk about sports, at least from an OG perspective now, because I remember, I wanted to become a sportscaster so I could make a lot of comparisons and analogies, as accurate as I possibly can. And before Mike, like I said, people saw The Last Dance and they're like, oh, but I remember Mike doesn't get the real legitimate hip hop props if Spike Lee doesn't bring Mars Blackman into the table. So Mars Blackman, Brooklyn, Michael Jordan, born in Brooklyn, and then his game spoke for him after those things start to kick in. So, before that, you couldn't sleep on Georgetown and Patrick Ewing and what John Thompson had brought to the table as an all-black team and the most popular NCAA period that we've had and we've seen.
Absolutely, man. And they would say that you were one of the first artists to really start wearing the snapbacks of the Raiders and Georgetown and Detroit Pistons, and not necessarily as a fan of those teams, but what they really meant to the culture.
Yeah, it behooved me because on It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, I wear Raiders snapback.
Right.
Because I wanted to wear a black hat, and what the Raiders stood for is Oakland, the Black Panthers. So I wanted to get that across. So it wasn't, and although it was at Los Angeles Raiders, but I knew the Raiders to me growing up meant Oakland. So if I'm wearing, a New York hat, I'm wearing a New York hat. People don't know this is the New York Giants, Willie Mays, before it became the Mets and all that. So I've always wore the gear to represent something a little deeper than just what people have on the front value. I wore the P because of Roberto Clemente, not just Public Enemy. And when you get into Roberto Clemente, you get into the dynamics of what he meant for his people, giving the Latino community in North and South and Central America and the Caribbean a voice with his, but as well following him for his dynamic play as well. But there's always something deeper. And when we were able to get the official sports hats and gear, because that we couldn't get that stuff in the 70s. I remember very clearly taking my magic marker and trying to make a Braves or a Mets jersey out of a t-shirt, and coloring it in with paints and stuff like that. And it was a licensing situation that would not really let these teams sell stuff into the marketplace. So they were hard to get. But in the 80s, some things happened. They let up, and Starter had the first licenses to actually go in and get the actual, if there wasn't 100% authentic, they was really close. Mm-hmm. And so therefore that resonated. If you saw something on television, you wanted to have that same thing. You didn't want to have a knockoff. Right. And I don't want to get started into the Dollar Tree font, man, because there's nothing worse than getting Dollar Tree hate mail, man.
No, I hate it.
Got to get hate mail from Dollar Tree, man, with crooked fonts, man, and misspelled words. So
I always think about that Biggie. So when Tigers on your shirts and alligators.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Well, yeah, Chuck, man. This has been such a somber year, like a year of loss, from you came on and talked about Kobe back in February, and now in this whole weekend we had Chadwick
Black Mamba, Black Mamba and Black Panther. Go figure, right?
Black Mamba and Black Panther, man. And such a shame. But I love having these conversations with you, and we can really archive these conversations for, years to come, for people to really learn about who these people were and the legacies that they leave. So we definitely appreciate you giving us the time. And you're a busy guy. We know the album's coming out next month. So
man, those things take care of itself, man. I do 1 trillion interviews, and that's a visit to Def Jam. Flavor wanted to be with Major League, and I like to do independent, so that's a compromise to Flavor Flav. So let's go to Def Jam and pay some visits and stuff like that. But we have a bigger thing at hand. It's like it's a time to use a record not for the record sense. It's time to make a statement. And if people could say, well, the platform for a record is just a statement of one line, it's like, what you going to do when the grid goes down? When they come and play these tricks, man, we got less than 75 days to go to a November. Be prepared either way, be ready either way. Prepare yourself, be heady, be smart. These are unprecedented times. And it's just not a time to kind of be backwards and on some dumbish. I mean, it's really a serious time. If somebody just feels that, I don't feel like you feel, you look at your elders and look at your children if you ain't got neither, then you might have some points from your individual self. But most people that I know not only got elders still, they got their children, and they got their grandchildren. Right. So you have to kind of be some solid ground, give some advice, and figure out how you keep afloat. And there's no time for micro differences out there. I personally feel that it's either or. And I do feel in this thing, it's so polarized. It's like, it's a side that might not admit, but with all the stuff that comes out that says that it kind of hates you versus the side that you're on. And before you get into who feels about whatever on the side that you're on, you got to neutralize the side that hates you, man. So, I put that out there. I'll leave that at that. Let's get back to ball. Let's talk about some things. And it's great that you guys put out, a little onto the surface about, the great John Thompson.
Absolutely, man. Well, Chuck, we definitely appreciate it all the time, OG. Be safe out there, and hope we do it again.
Yes, sir. Yes, gents. Y'all take care. Keep doing your thing. I'll catch you on the other side.
Take care, Chuck. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
The great Chuck D. Salute to everybody in the chat. Hit that thumbs up button for you boys. Back at it again, man. Another quality interview. We had to commemorate, the passing of John Thompson, man. He's a pillar, Jails. He's an absolute pillar of our community, and again, you can't talk Patrick Ewing without going back to the essence and saluting John Thompson, man, and what he brought to the game. You know, Ewing, Mutombo, Alonzo Mourning, Allen Iverson, you know, the names go on. They all attribute, you know, their success, their upgrade. You know, Allen Iverson said John Thompson saved his life.
Yeah.
You know, Alonzo Mourning said John Thompson saved his life. That's major.
That is major. That's major. Like when you read the stories of John Thompson and what he did, it's apparent like the impact just surpasses just basketball. He just impacts people's lives. And when you lose somebody like that, it hurts a little bit more. Like just to know that he just cares. No, it's not just about basketball. I'm just looking out for your well-being. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to stop drug dealers. I'm going to go the extra mile to fight for the people who I care about. So salute to John Thompson and everything he's done for this world.
Absolutely. Well said, man.